I'm Dr. George Flynn, and you're watching In-Depth TV. We appreciate you being here, and I have got a guest today that's going to take this by storm. Be sure and pay attention because he's got a lot of good information. James Renford Powell. I've been acquainted with him for years, and he is, I would call him a friend. And I tell you, he's got some information about universal laws. Yes, that's right. Universal laws.
Right.
Welcome. Welcome, Jim. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, Jim, I know something about you that you may not know I know about you. You've got 31 books. You got workbooks, manuals. And why in the world do you put so much emphasis on this thing, universal laws?
I have that question from time to time, George, and the fact is that I've come to the conclusion that there isn't anything else but the universal laws. We live, move, and have our being in God according to the scriptures. In other words, we're swimming in God. Everything is all around you. It's living it, and we're not even aware of it. And it was a surprise to me. You know, I was a theology major, a Bible major at Freed-Hardeman University back in '65 and '66. And I went to a mission seminar with Maurice C. Hall. And I don't know how famous he is anywhere else, but within the church, he was quite well known. And he was the missionary handling about 30 young people in Vietnam. It's almost like Peace Corps. And I got over there, and we had to study a language, either the Montagnard language or the Vietnamese language or the Chinese language. There's a huge amount of Chinese, 500,000 Chinese in Cholan, which is an adjacent city. And so I decided to work with them. And so I had to go to the University of Saigon School of Living Languages, which is probably Ho Chi Minh University now. But at that time, I went there and started the course, and it was taught in Vietnamese. And so I told the professor afterward, you know, it's interesting, but I can't learn anything this way. And he said, he was from Beijing. And he said, well, I'll come to your house and teach you because it's the French system. I didn't have to be at classes there and just had to go back and take the exam. So he came to my house and he taught me, and that's the way I got started. And the whole idea was to establish rapport with the Chinese students, because as a missionary teacher, I was a young man. I was in the early 20s. And so I was right in that age bracket with those students. And when I got in there trying to establish rapport with them, I began to read things like Water Margin, which is a famous Chinese tales type of book, the Analects of Confucius and the Tao Te Ching and all of this, so I could talk to them. And I would be reading something, and I come across this quote, and it sounds so much like Jesus. And I go back to my wife and I say, who do you think said that? And she'd say, Jesus. And I said, no, that was Buddha. And then I'd come back a week or later or something and I'd say, who do you think said this? And she'd say, Jesus. And no, that was Lao Tzu. And finally, I think she got tired of it. She said, or she was more intuitive than I was. She said, I don't want to hear this anymore. And so I began to write these down, these principles. And these were all principles. And then that made me go back and study the Bible more. You know, then I got into looking at what Jesus said in Matthew 13:34 and 35. He said, I came to reveal the secrets that have lain hidden from the foundations of the earth. And he told his apostles, I've taught you the mysteries. They're too thick for this, basically, is what he was saying. Their eyes are closed. And if you go in and you study the parables, you'll see that in each one of them, there's one of these 13 principles being taught. But these principles were being taught by Buddha in his stories. They're being taught by Lao Tzu in his way. So that really put me off onto a lifetime look at these 13 principles, which never changed. And I say they're 13 because each one of the 13 is connected to the other 12. And where the where Jesus and Buddha and the other famous masters didn't bother to show that these were connected. This has kind of been what I've done in my books, is show how each one of these laws are connected to the other. And that's I spent 20 years abroad. From after 4.5 years in Vietnam, I was there from August 66 to December 70. And then I was in Hong Kong for 8 years, and from there to Cyprus, and from rather to Bahrain for 3 years, and then to Cyprus, and then to England for 2 years. So I was gone about 20 years, and that gave me an opportunity to, talk with the Muslims, talk with the Chinese, didn't matter what. I was doing business there. I was working in finance, but this gave me an opportunity to continue studying this very, very interesting subject to me. I've really been caught up in those principles, and the books reflect this. They're like 7 different genres, like you've seen the laws of material wealth. Well, a lot of people don't care what Jesus or Buddha had to say, but they're real interested in what business has to say, or in the case of the rules of the game, what they're interested in what Vince Lombardi, Lou Holtz, and Barry Bryan had to say. So each case I used sort of like, in fact, the way Jesus did it. He talked where they could understand what he was talking about. He explained to them on their level.
You say you find these in the parables. So, our audience is basically a Christian audience. So they'll want to focus on where you find these in the Bible. And then once they look and find a few of them, I'm sure they'll want to look maybe at one of your books or something like that, because
well, I'm sorry. I have a new book I've just finished. It's being edited now, called The Revealer, and that's showing each law that's being taught in each parable.
Okay. Now that's where I bet most of our
there might be some parties there. I have one called.
We'll put an address under your, at the end of the broadcast, where they can get in touch with you when this book comes out, because it's fun to go look for them, but it would be nice to have someone direct you in where in the Bible to find these.
Right. I have a fairly substantial YouTube site. And on that site, it has all of my television shows here in Memphis, the Bookman show and the Core Concept shows. And some of that material is up there free. They can actually go up and look at that Laws of Material Wealth up there free. And there's quite a bit in ebook form that is free to anybody who inquires.
Okay, so there's some ebooks out there. And this Laws of Material Wealth, you've written some other books on other things, other topics, and now you're focused on this. Is that why you want to make sure that everyone knows these basic universal laws, or why is it that you've gotten so interested in this?
Well, the laws of material wealth. I used to have an office in the Clark Tower back in the early 90s. And my company was IFEX Funding, and I raised the money to raise the money. I worked with people who were trying to raise capital, and every one of them to an individual would say all they really needed was the money, the capital to run their business. And the more I looked at the situation, the more I thought they got other problems to the way they're looking at life. I mean, when they're looking at things, and you've got, I don't know, there's so many books on success. And I mean, you could fill up rooms full of books on success, and they all seem to be saying the same thing. If you analyze it, they're all saying you got to know what you want, you got to design a plan to get what you want, and you have to have the desire to see the plan through. And some of them will stress a particular thing there and push a little bit more. But if you boil it down, that's what they're saying. The problem is, most people think that, like in Napoleon Hill, he puts his emphasis on persistence and staying with it. But the biggest problem I think people have is knowing what they want. They know they don't want to go to jail. They know they don't want to be sick. They know they don't want to die, and so forth. And so they kind of narrow it down to what they want from knowing what they don't want. But to know what you want specifically is not the easiest thing in the world. And if a person has to really think about it and get into it, and if I think that really comes before knowing what knowing what you want, designing a plan to get what you want, and having the plan, the desire to, the persistence to see the plan through. It's really important to know where you are, and most of us just don't know where we are. And this is something that we can determine for ourselves. You don't have to have a guru. You don't have to have a pastor even. You don't have to go contemplate your navel in Tibet. It's a matter of identifying and verifying these laws from your own life experiences. So these books are all designed depending on where they're coming from, is so they can relate to it, so they can identify that principle from something that's happened to them. And it's very difficult to do if you're saying, okay, now what about this law of relativity, or what about this law of being? And then you can sit there for months and not come up with it. But if you will go back and look at those situations in your life, sometimes we try to forget them because they weren't pleasant. But if we can go back and look at that, you can identify the principle that was in play there. And if somebody can identify and verify each of these laws, it's really a paradigm shift for them. I mean, it's you can go to a football game for a long, long time and not know the rules. A lot of people do. They don't know much about the rules. But it's really an eye opener when you understand the rules of the game, and the universal laws are the rules of the game of life.
And what do you see as some of those rules? Just a few things that you might, off the top of your head, that other people might not have been thinking about.
Well, most of us know when Jesus was asked which was the most important, he said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbors yourself. So he specified love as being the most important. All right. Buddha, on the other hand, when they asked him, he said the first law is that everything in the material world changes. And the second part of that, all of our problems come from resisting that change, which is rather profound too. And Lao Tzu seemed to stress the wu, the balance between heaven and earth, and balance in your life and harmony. So all of these masters tended to stress one thing over another, but that's three of the laws there: the law of evolution and unfoldment, the law of balance and equalization, and the law of love. Are three of those principles that, and these masters tended to stress.
And you have
all,
you have written about this and really studied it. And let's go back just a minute. I mean, I know you were in Vietnam. I know you spent a lot of time in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
What really focused you on this? I mean, were you looking around for something to write about, or have you always wanted to write, or how did you get exactly into the universal laws?
I really didn't start. I wrote my mission reports and so forth, but I really didn't start writing until I was in Cyprus and then in England, and a lot of the laws of material wealth was actually written there because I was working on business. But the real impetus for the whole thing, the whole start was to find and understand and establish rapport with my Chinese students there back in the first 2 years that I was in Vietnam. See, by 68, you had the Tet Offensive hit, and I'm down in the Chinese section of the city. We didn't go anywhere for 16 days. They were fighting. There was fighting all around. So by the time that the Tet Offensive was over, you then had a curfew, and most of the missionaries went home, and I was too young and dumb to go home. So I wanted to stay. So I got a job with a Hong Kong-based investment company and remained there another 2.5 years. But most of it was because I wanted to continue what I'd started learning, and it took a long time. In fact, it was at first it was like having your feet knocked out from under you. You know, if you've been coming from a particular conservative religious background, and then you find that there are so many other things that are comparable around the world, and you think that everything that you're doing is so unique, and you're over there in Vietnam to save souls, and then you find that there's quite a bit of understanding and knowledge there. So it was It really took me 4 or 5 years. I continued to study the laws, but I really got to the point I didn't want anything to do with any religion. I kind of went off religion altogether. And even my organization now, the Church of Revelation and the Institute of Applied Metaphysics, it's all about knowing. It's all about this process of identifying and verifying the laws. It's not about believing something. We got plenty of people to tell us what we ought to believe, but I'm interested in the process of where we can identify and verify that principle from our own life experience, and then we can say, I know that's true, been there and done that. This is real.
But you say there you found in your writings 13 laws.
13 universal principles.
Well, could there be more?
When you read some writers, you'll find them dividing one. I've seen some going 21. I've seen Deepak Chopra talk about the 7 spiritual laws. I don't know what he did with the other 6 or how he combined that in there. But all of your your writers like Aldous Huxley. You remember Aldous Huxley wrote The Perennial Philosophy. He's talking about the 13. And I remember when I was first doing it, I didn't have access to the libraries and things like this. And I never heard of these other writers. I never heard of Aldous Huxley, to tell you the truth. And Charles Hannell, who wrote The Master Key, and more recently, Dan Millman. There are other peoples. It's not something I dreamed up, but I just had to reinvent the wheel. I had to do it on my own because I wasn't here. I couldn't run down to the Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
So I did it the hard way.
So the books weren't there. The knowledge was there, but nobody had put it down really.
Well, I was finding it through more archaic books, older books, and not the ones where other people had written about the 13 principles.
There's so much information out there. How would you suggest someone discern who's giving good information versus who's just trying to sell you a bill of goods?
I think everything that's worthwhile is experiential learning. It's experiential. You've got to identify and verify that principle for yourself, make it yours so that you know it's true. Anything else, you're taking on the fact that you have confidence in this particular person, where he's a teacher, a pastor, a mullah, whatever. If you have, confidence in them, then you might accept some of what they're saying on faith. But if you want to know, if you want to identify and verify the principles for yourself, that's the way to go. And look, even in my books, everything I tell you, I'm not professing to be Swami Jim. I'm saying you need to check and verify. I can share with you what I've come to know, but I had a teacher there in Hong Kong that said, basically, he said the old adage that you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink.
Right.
And he said you share with people. That's one of the laws, the universal law of giving and receiving. He said you can share with them, but you can't make them do anything. This is totally up to the individual as to how much emphasis they give it and how hard they want to work on it. And
a lot of people don't see that.
Yeah.
They think if it's something about sharing with them and then casting your pearls before swine and like that. You think you've got the great knowledge you're sharing and they should pick up on it. And if they don't let it hurt your feelings.
And Jesus said that. He said, don't cast your pearls before swine. You can share with people. Even when he had them in Luke 10, when he had them the 72, go into all the cities and everywhere else, he said, you share what they put in front of you to eat. You share with them. And if they don't accept you, then you shake the dust off your feet and move on. That's all you can do. You can share with people.
Yeah. Don't waste your time continuing to try, because there are plenty of other people out there that would like to have that knowledge.
I tell my students that I can make 3 promises to you. One, this is self-verifiable. You don't need a pastor, guru, or anybody else to do this. You just identify and verify these principles from your own life experience. If you're a Christian and you believe that everything else is from the devil, then just go study the parables. Just study that. Don't worry about it. I don't. I mean, it's not something that you have conflict over. This is better than the other. Go with what you know, and begin this process of identifying, verifying. So I tell them you can do this yourself. And the second thing I tell them that I can promise you is that if you do identify and verify each of these laws from your own experiences, you'll never be walking down the street wondering what hit you.
Mm-hmm.
You will never be in a coffee shop in a befuddled state, not knowing what's going on. You may be enjoying your coffee and figuring out your next move, but it will not be because you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I say the third thing I can promise you is once you've identified and verified those principles, every time you hear a speaker, read a book, go to a seminar, or even go to a party and listen to people talk, you're going to know almost immediately where they're coming from doctrine and dogma, from academia, from what they've been taught, or where they're just blowing smoke. And you don't need to tell them that you know they're blowing smoke, but it's very important that you know.
Yeah.
That's the 3 promises that I make.
Well, it sounds really interesting. If somebody wants to know more, where do they start?
Well, there's some things that I can provide, like a 1-sheet affirmation sheet, which has those 13 principles embedded in it. And I send it to anybody that wants it free. I just say, read it aloud once a day. And that's it. You don't have to light a candle or do anything out of the ordinary. Just read it once a day out loud. All right.
Yeah.
And my website can be provided, that very big YouTube site, and anything they want, they can just email me and I'll send it to them. You can even get a couple of free ebooks that way just by contacting me.
What is your website?
The website is www, of course, iam-cor.org.
iam-c.org.
.org, that's all.
Okay.
And they can email me at iamrenford, iamrenford @gmail.com, and I'll provide them with anything they want to do, because it's a job they're doing themselves. There's no shortcut. There's no osmosis, and there's no master that can lead you through that hoops. You have to do it yourself.
You mean you can't just put the book under your pillow like we were taught and learn while you sleep?
Well, we're doing some recordings now. We're making all the books audio.
Yeah.
So maybe they could turn it on and go to sleep with it, with the audio book.
Jim, I really appreciate you taking your time to be here with us, and we will we'll have his name and website and address to be able to contact him and get those absolutely free materials. Will be right here on the screen. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate you asking me. Thank you.
Okay, and until next time, I'm Dr. George Flynn. You've been watching In-Depth TV. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.